India says in this official statement that we're monitoring the situation in Syria in light of the ongoing developments, and we underline the need for all parties to work towards preserving unity, sovereignty and integrity, territorial integrity of Syria. I want to go across to Akanksha Swaroop joining us with more details. Akanksha, while there are so many factors at play here and how this really, or what this really in fact means for Middle East going forward, India also is very closely monitoring the situation despite the very few Indians who are present in Syria. Tell us how the ME is looking at this overall.
Right. If you go by the statement that has come out, Krithween, they say that we advocate a peaceful and inclusive Syrian-led political process, respecting the interests and the aspiration of all sections of Syrian society. Our embassy in Damascus is in contact with the Indian community for their safety and security. So very important to keep in mind that India has, from its own end, accepted the disturbances, the transition to power. And we'll have to see, as you know, the United States also has been maintaining that this has to be a peaceful transition, that the various institutions have to be run and keeping the public interest of Syrians in mind, of all those from the diaspora community in mind. As you said, that it's a small population of Indians. Nonetheless, there are close to about 90 Indian nationals who are there. Many of them, close to 14, are in fact assisting on the UN-led programs. So India, ever since disturbances in Syria began, India has been very closely monitoring the situation. Our embassy, of course, continues to remain operational in Damascus, and that's in fact quite relieving to know that the embassy is still operational. The embassy is also remaining available to all Indian nationals, assisting them in Syria. India, of course, has been very closely monitoring the situation, and I think expect New Delhi to be in touch with the UN, and they will perhaps also be participating in that entire transition that will take place. India has its own interests as well. We've been importing oil from Syria. So India will ensure that its economic interests also remain protected, as do our security concerns.
Okay, many thanks, Akanksha, for putting that in perspective. I also want to take a quick comment from Siddhant Mishra joining us on the broadcast. Siddhant, we also see this, brief reaction on part of the ME as far as power transition in Syria going forward is concerned. Now, HDS, the rebel group that's, responsible for the ouster of President Assad, has also said that they're going to welcome the regime that's going to be chosen by the people of Syria. And India, in this sense, seems to be reflecting on the same sentiment.
Well, this is the first statement by Government of India on the power transition, because all eyes are going to be on how smooth the power transition takes place, because the rebel forces which have taken down the Assad regime has a grim track record of terrorism and human rights abuse. And in fact, the HDS is UN and US designated terror group. So if the West is calling it a regime change for freedom, for the progress and good for the people of Syria, then whether the HDS regime in Syria would bring perhaps the change that the people of Syria have been looking for is something that the world is watching very, very closely. So this is perhaps for the first time that the Government of India has come up with a statement. And in fact, the Government of India has to say that there's a need for all parties to work towards preserving the unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity of Syria. India advocates a peaceful and inclusive Syrian-led political process, respecting the interests and aspirations of all sections of Syrian society. So perhaps India is talking about all sections of Syrian society. Also, India believes that the transition process needs to be peaceful and inclusive and should be led by a Syrian-led political process, respecting the interests and aspirations of Syrian society. So, that is exactly what India is looking at right now, because not just HTS, but there are other forces also. There are other groups also active in the region. And perhaps, for the stability of Syria and region, it is very important that the transition takes place in an inclusive and peaceful manner, and it should reflect upon the aspirations of the Syrian people.
Thanks for putting that in perspective, Siddhant. Let's play out the other reactions coming in. The External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also spoke of how India is going to be looking at this, competing interest in the region, in the Middle East, and what he makes of the ongoing conflict and the developments that have come in from Syria, and also how United States, most importantly, is monitoring what is happening in the Middle East. Here are those reactions.
How can we cooperate strategically? I think first of all, obviously you cooperate in a political, diplomatic way. What we do in my business is essentially try to address the challenges of the day as collectively and as effectively as possible. And this today would extend from Gaza to Lebanon, now to Syria as well. But at the same time, we have to be realistic about competing interests in this region. So diplomacy is often easier said than done. One of the interesting evolution of the world today is actually on different issues, sometimes even in the same region. You have a different combination of countries that are working together. And that, to me, is actually the characteristic of our era.